It's showtime, folks!
Hey there, folks. I wasn't really expecting to make a full video on this. My original plan was to do my review for Godzilla Minus One as a short, but I realized while writing it that it was going to be too long. This isn't going to be one of my jokey deep dives or spoiler heavy like my other videos, so you have nothing to worry about if you want to see this movie. Based off the name of my character and one of the posters I have in the background here, it probably isn't a shock to learn that I am a Godzilla fan, and have been since I was a kid. However, that doesn't mean that I blindly love every movie in the franchise. There's some that I think are genuinely good movies, and there are some that I like because I think they are fun schlock. I think a good deal of them are just okay to passable movies at best. There's even some I saw as a kid and didn't care for or downright hated even then. But my mind has changed on some of them. So without further ado, I'm Jesszilla, and I'm going to ramble a bit about Godzilla Minus One. Godzilla Minus One comes from the Japanese film studio Toho and is 2 hours and 5 minutes long. It was written and directed by Takashi Yamazaki and stars Ryunosuke Kamiki, Minami Hamabe, Kuranosuke, Yuki Yamada, Harataka Yoshioka, Minetaka Aoki, and Sakura Ando. Most of those names I'm sure I just butchered. I'll start with the reason most people are going to see this movie: the big man himself. Overall, I do like the design for Godzilla in this, but I do have one complaint, right here. The dorsal plates, back spikes, spines, fins, or whatever name you prefer to use, just seem too big and disproportionate to the rest of his body for my liking. But it could be worse. The spines could be like the ones on a couple of the Millennium-era designs that were large and all crazy jagged looking, and made Godzilla look like he was going through an edgy teen metalhead phase. This is the first time I watched a Godzilla movie where I felt truly terrified of Godzilla and wanted to see the attempt at destroying him succeed. I know there were plenty of folks who felt the same way about Shin Godzilla, but my thoughts on Godzilla in that one were, this is totally insane and awesome because of that insanity. Writer-director Takashi Yamazaki did a good job of cultivating a feeling of tension and dread whenever Godzilla is on screen. The boat chase that was shown in the trailers had me on pins and needles throughout the sequence. And I feel like I should give a warning for the people hoping for something like the original Godzilla movie when it comes to the Tokyo Rampage. The sequence is brief, but very effective in showing Godzilla as an unstoppable force. I'll admit that I was disappointed in the length of the Rampage scene, but I've gotten over it since my viewing Friday afternoon. The movie takes place shortly after World War II, and it is made clear that a great deal of Tokyo is in rubble. It wouldn't really have worked seeing a giant monster destroying what has already been razed to the ground. But I digress. The final shot of the movie, though very predictable for me, still managed to leave me with a feeling of dread of what might happen next if this one actually gets a sequel, unlike its Japanese predecessor. And if it doesn't get a sequel, like Shin Godzilla before it, I am fine with this being its own standalone story in its own continuity. I just hope that if this is the case, that whatever Toho does next isn't another reimagining of Godzilla's origin. Because it happens a lot in Lego sequels and reboots, I went into this movie with a little bit of the feeling of we're going to get a lot of moments of, remember this? And callbacks to previous movies in the series. I was surprised that it didn't really happen, or at least in a way that bothered me. There was a reused music cue from Godzilla vs. Mothra in the Rampage scene, if I'm remembering correctly. And the music cue in the climax was reminiscent to the musical cue from King Kong vs. Godzilla when the people of Faroe Island needed to put King Kong on the Dreamland Express. The reusing of music cues didn't really bother me because that's something that's been very common with this franchise. The thing that felt like the most blatant callback didn't bother me at all. It was a moment that mirrored something that happened in the original Godzilla movie. There were quite a few moments that felt like obvious setups that did end up paying off later on in the movie. Without getting too far into spoilers, one of them involved what would eventually lead to Godzilla's defeat in the end of the movie. There was one moment in the final act that really made me groan because I saw what this moment of setup was going to lead to, and I instantly hated what I knew was going to happen. There was another that also paid off in a way I didn't care for, but its setup was very subtle, so at least I'll applaud the setup for how it was handled. I did feel like the movie dragged after Godzilla's Tokyo Rampage, but it did pick back up again for the final act and the climax. I can forgive the slower pacing during this, because a lot of that was the movie taking its time and showing how the emergence of a giant monster has made things worse for an already down-and-out city of people, and the formation of a plan to defeat Godzilla. I was both shocked that this plan of action was practical and grounded, and was not just a plot-convenient superweapon like what was used in the original. Godzilla Minus One, like the original movie, does have a clear message about the threat of nuclear weapons, and there is also a clear commentary on the Japanese government's treatment of its citizens and soldiers during and after World War II. Both of these came across pretty clear to me, but there are moments that make them clear to any members of the audience who did not notice this messaging at first. If the bombed remains of Tokyo don't have you thinking of footage of Hiroshima and Nagasaki after they had Fat Man and Little Boy dropped on them, then the moment Godzilla unleashes his atomic breath during his Tokyo rampage, which was a moment that added another layer of fear in this version of the character for me, will definitely do that. This moment is probably the closest I'll get to see to something I've wanted to see since I was a teenager in a Godzilla movie, which would be Godzilla unleashing his atomic breath on a crowd of fleeing people, only for their shadows to be left behind like the Hiroshima shadows that were seen after the atomic bomb was dropped. There's also a rallying speech given by one of the secondary characters in the latter part of the movie that gets the point of the treatment of the Japanese citizens across. I saw a few advanced reviews complaining about moments of comic relief, which led me to believe that we would get the Marvel Studios fare of jokes being inserted into inappropriate moments which would dissolve any dramatic moments that were occurring, and maybe some of the feeling like everyone is winking towards the camera that I felt Marvel movies have started to have since the first Guardians of the Galaxy. I will say that this is thankfully incorrect. The movie does have a couple of comic relief moments, but they are very brief and they didn't take away from a serious dramatic scene. Everything in this movie for the most part is straight and serious. The protagonist, Koichi Shishikishima, played by Ryonosuke Kamiki, is a kamikaze pilot who failed in his mission during the Second World War, which he wrestles with throughout the story, along with some PTSD he gains from a traumatic event that the movie opens with, and also causes him to feel that Godzilla's rampage on the Japanese mainland is his own fault. The open act mostly focuses on Koichi's fight with his inner demons, along with the struggle for basic survival in post-war Tokyo that he and the surrogate family he forms makes this feel like a personal story. If the opening sequence, which kind of made me think of the opening to Jurassic Park, were removed from this movie, and this just started with the drama of the characters and their struggles with day-to-day life, it would really make the appearance of Godzilla feel really out of place. I went into this expecting something just passable or downright bad like the reboots I've seen the past couple years, but I left the theater feeling both pleasantly surprised and entertained. I'm not going to say that this is the best movie of the Godzilla franchise, like so many other people are, but it's definitely in the latter half of the top 10 for me, and quite possibly the best Godzilla movie that has been made in my lifetime. My overall rating of Godzilla Minus One is 3.5 out of 5. It's not a bad way to blow 2 hours, and I'll definitely pick it up when the Blu-ray hits. Just go in knowing that its theatrical run is only available to view in Japanese with English subtitles, if that is something that could be a deal breaker for you. I'm sure we'll see a dub on the home release when that comes out, and I will also put a link to purchase once pre-orders for that open. Well, that's it for Godzilla Minus One. I'll have one of my usual deep dive videos out by the end of the month. So if you are new here, or returning and just haven't yet, give me a subscribe if you don't want to miss out on that. If you like what I'm doing and want to help the channel grow, leaving a like, giving this video a share, or leaving a comment will be greatly appreciated. Also, don't be afraid to follow me on my Letterboxd account or Twitter, which are linked in the description. Like always, go out and form your own opinions, and don't blindly follow a chosen herd or my word alone. I'm Just Zilla, and this has been my moronic opinion. Thank you for your time.